There are some characters from our childhood that feel more like friends than fiction. For a whole generation of kids in the 90s, there was one hero who stood above all the rest. He was the mysterious new kid, the bad boy with a dark secret who played a haunting tune on his flute-like dagger. He was the Green Ranger, and he was, in a word, cool. He was so popular that when his story was supposed to end, millions of kids and their parents revolted, demanding he be brought back. And he was, again and again. But what about the man behind the helmet? What happens when the world sees you as an invincible superhero, but in reality, you're just a man fighting battles no one can see? The story of Jason David Frank is far more complex and heartbreaking than any Power Rangers episode. It's a story about a kid from a tough neighborhood who became a global icon overnight. It's about a lifelong martial artist who dedicated himself to his craft, both on and off the screen. But it's also a story about the immense weight of a legacy, the pressure to be a hero 24/7, and a devastating struggle with the kind of inner demons that no Zord or Megazord could ever defeat. Today we're going to look beyond the spandex and the catchphrases to understand the incredible life and the tragic loss of the man who was and always will be the greatest Power Ranger of them all. To understand the phenomenon of Jason David Frank, you have to rewind to the early 1990s. It was a wild time for kids' television. The airwaves were a chaotic mix of cartoons and live-action shows, all competing for the attention of a generation raised on video games and blockbuster movies. Then, in 1993, something completely new and utterly bizarre hit the screen. It was called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. The show was a strange hybrid, a stroke of producing genius by a man named Haim Saban. He took action-packed monster fighting footage from a popular Japanese show called Super Sentai and spliced it together with new scenes featuring a cast of wholesome American teenagers. The premise was simple. 5 teenagers with attitude are chosen to defend the Earth from the evil alien sorceress, Rita Repulsa. It was cheesy, it was low budget, and it became an absolute cultural juggernaut overnight. Kids were obsessed. The show was a perfect cocktail of high school drama, martial arts action, and giant robot dinosaurs. Every kid on the playground was arguing over who got to be which ranger. The merchandise flew off the shelves, and the young, unknown cast was suddenly catapulted into a level of fame that was almost Beatle-esque in its intensity. They were mobbed at shopping malls. Their faces were on lunchboxes and bedsheets, and they were the heroes to millions of children around the world. It was into this whirlwind of sudden, massive fame that Jason David Frank, a young martial artist from Covina, California, was about to be thrown. He wasn't part of the original 5. He was brought in later for a special multi-episode arc. He was meant to be a temporary character, a villain who would challenge the heroes and then disappear. But the creators of the show had no idea what they were about to unleash. They had no idea that this young man, with his quiet intensity and legitimate martial arts prowess, was about to hijack the entire show and become its undisputed star. The context is crucial. Jason David Frank didn't just join a TV show. He joined a cultural phenomenon at the absolute peak of its power, and in doing so, he would change its destiny and his own forever. Jason David Frank's story doesn't begin in a casting office. It begins in a dojo. Born in 1973, he was a martial artist from a very young age. It wasn't just a hobby for him. It was a way of life, a source of discipline and identity. By the time he was a teenager, he was already a skilled practitioner, teaching classes and dreaming of opening his own school. Acting was almost an afterthought, a suggestion from his agent that he go out for a role on a new kids show. That show, of course, was Power Rangers. He auditioned for the role of the Red Ranger, Jason Lee Scott, but the part went to another actor. It seemed like a dead end. But then the producers called him back. They had another part in mind, a special guest role. He would play Tommy Oliver, a new student who is brainwashed by Rita Repulsa and becomes her evil Green Ranger. He was only supposed to be on the show for a handful of episodes. He was the villain, and in the world of kids' TV, the villain always loses. But something incredible happened. From the moment he appeared on screen with his long hair, his brooding silence, and his genuinely impressive martial arts skills, kids were captivated. He was the mysterious, powerful anti-hero, and he was infinitely cooler than the clean-cut heroes he was fighting. The Green with Evil saga became the most popular storyline of the series. When the spell was finally broken and Tommy joined the Power Rangers, his popularity exploded. The producers had a problem. Their temporary villain was now the most popular character on the show. The fan mail poured in, demanding more of the Green Ranger, so they kept him on. But the Japanese footage they were using was finite. Eventually, the Green Ranger's powers had to fade. In a series of heartbreaking episodes, Tommy lost his connection to the Morphin Grid. It was supposed to be the end of his story, but the fans wouldn't have it. The outcry was so immense that the creators knew they had to bring him back, and so in a brilliant move, they created a brand new American exclusive Ranger just for him. Tommy Oliver returned not as the Green Ranger, but as the new, even more powerful White Ranger and the undisputed leader of the team. It was a coronation. The show that he had joined as a guest star was now his show. This is a rarely discussed but crucial part of his story. Jason David Frank's career was a direct result of audience demand. He wasn't a product of a studio's marketing plan. He was a grassroots phenomenon, a character who became a star because the fans willed it to be so. This forged a unique and powerful bond between him and his audience, a bond that would last for the rest of his life. He would go on to portray Tommy Oliver in multiple iterations of the franchise, evolving from the White Ranger to the Red Zeo Ranger, the Red Turbo Ranger, and later returning as the legendary Black Dino Thunder Ranger. No other actor has had such a long and storied history with the franchise. He was the constant, the anchor, the living embodiment of the Power Rangers legacy. But as the years went on, his relationship with that legacy became more complex. He left the show to pursue other interests, but he could never fully escape the shadow of Tommy Oliver. He dedicated himself even more intensely to martial arts, earning high-level black belts in multiple disciplines, and eventually developing his own style, Toso Kune Do. He even had a brief and intense career as a professional mixed martial arts fighter, competing in the cage to prove that his skills were real, that he was more than just a TV hero. It was a constant battle, a desire to be respected as a legitimate martial artist and fighter, while also honoring the character that had given him everything. To understand the man Jason David Frank became, you have to understand the incredible connection he had with his fans. For decades, he was one of the hardest working and most accessible figures on the comic convention circuit, and his appearances were legendary. While some celebrities might sit behind a table for a few hours, Jason would often be there from open to close, making sure that every single person who stood in his line, sometimes for hours, got their moment with him. He wouldn't just sign an autograph and send them on their way. He would talk to them, listen to their stories, and make a genuine connection. Fans would tell him how the character of Tommy Oliver helped them through difficult childhoods, how he inspired them to stand up to bullies or to start their own martial arts journey. And he took every single one of those stories to heart. He understood on a profound level the impact his character had on millions of lives, and he felt a deep and genuine responsibility to honor that. There's a famous story that perfectly encapsulates his dedication. At one convention, the event was closing and the staff was trying to shut down his line. There were still hundreds of people waiting. Instead of packing up, Jason announced that he would meet every single person, even if it took all night. He moved his entire operation out into the lobby of the convention center and stayed for hours until the last fan had their autograph and their photo. That was who he was. He saw his fans not as a source of income, but as his extended family, the people who had given him his career. But this deep connection also came with an immense weight. He was not just Jason David Frank. He was Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger. He was a real-life hero to millions. And that is an incredibly heavy burden for any person to carry. He was always on, always expected to be the strong, confident leader that he portrayed on screen. He felt a constant pressure to be a positive role model, to live up to the idealized image that his fans had of him. This pressure manifested in his deep commitment to his Christian faith. He was incredibly open about his beliefs, often speaking about them at panels and incorporating them into his public life. He started a brand and clothing line called Jesus Didn't Tap, a phrase that merged his faith with his identity as a martial artist. For him, it was a way to use his platform to spread a positive message, to offer the same kind of hope and inspiration to his fans that they had given to him. However, beneath the surface of the confident martial artist and the devoted fan favorite, there was a man who was fighting his own silent battles. He spoke openly in his later years about his struggles with depression and mental health. In one particularly raw and honest interview, he admitted, "I've been to hell and back in my life. I've had my own struggles." He talked about losing friends and family to suicide and the importance of reaching out and talking to people. It was a side of him that many fans didn't see. They saw the powerful kicks and the confident smile. They didn't see the man who was grappling with the same kind of pain and doubt that so many of us face. The irony is heartbreaking. The man who spent his life making other people feel strong and seen was struggling to feel that way himself. His personal life was often turbulent, with public divorces and family issues that played out in the glare of the internet. The pressure to be a perfect hero, combined with his own internal struggles, created a conflict that would ultimately have tragic consequences. The story of Jason David Frank is not without its complexities and controversies, many of which are intertwined with the very nature of the show that made him famous. The legacy of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is a complicated one, a mix of cherished childhood nostalgia and some darker, more difficult truths. One of the most significant controversies surrounding the original show was the treatment of its cast. These young actors were the faces of a billion-dollar franchise, yet they were paid shockingly little. They were non-union, and their contracts were incredibly restrictive. They worked long, grueling hours, performing their own stunts and making countless public appearances, all for wages that were barely above minimum wage. In later years, many of the original cast members, including Jason, would speak out about the difficult working conditions and the feeling of being exploited by the producers. This was a source of considerable debate for many years. On the one hand, the show had given them a platform and global fame. On the other, they had been the engine of a massive commercial success without being fairly compensated for their work. Another area of debate revolves around Jason's own complex relationship with his Power Ranger identity. For many years, he seemed to have a love-hate relationship with the role of Tommy Oliver. There were periods where he tried to distance himself from the franchise, focusing on his martial arts schools and his MMA career. He wanted to be seen as more than just a Power Ranger. This created a certain tension. He was fiercely proud of his legacy and deeply grateful to the fans, but he also bristled at the idea of being typecast forever. This led to some public conflicts and controversies. There were occasional disputes with other actors from the franchise, often playing out on social media, and debates among fans about his role as the face of Power Rangers. Some saw him as the passionate guardian of the brand's legacy, while others felt he sometimes overshadowed the other actors and iterations of the show. It was a difficult balancing act, and he didn't always get it right. He was a passionate and sometimes impulsive person, and his deep emotional investment in the franchise could occasionally lead to friction. But the most profound and heartbreaking controversy of his life is the one that surrounds his death. In November of 2022, the world was stunned by the news that Jason David Frank had died by suicide. He was just 49 years old. The news was met with an outpouring of shock and grief from fans around the world who had grown up idolizing him. The circumstances of his death were deeply personal and tragic, involving a dispute with his estranged wife. In the aftermath, his family was forced to navigate their immense grief in the full glare of public speculation. His wife, Tammy, later gave a brave and heartbreaking interview to set the record straight, explaining that Jason had struggled with depression and mental health issues for a long time. She described him as a wonderful and loving man who was in a great deal of pain. He was not a man who would have left his children, she stated, emphasizing that his death was the result of a mental health crisis. This has opened up a difficult but necessary debate. It has forced a generation of fans to reconcile the image of their invincible childhood hero with the tragic reality of a man who was lost to depression. It has sparked important conversations about mental health, especially among men who are often socialized to hide their struggles and to always appear strong. The controversy is not about placing blame, but about understanding the complex web of factors that can lead to such a tragedy. His death is a stark and painful reminder that the battles fought on the inside are often the most difficult, and that even the strongest heroes need help. The historical significance of Jason David Frank is unique in the annals of pop culture. He was not a critically acclaimed actor in the traditional sense, but his impact on a generation of fans is arguably as profound as any Oscar winner. He was a central figure in a global cultural phenomenon, and he managed to transform that initial burst of fame into a lifelong career and a powerful personal brand. His primary significance lies in his role as the definitive Power Ranger. For millions of people, when they think of the Power Rangers, they think of Tommy Oliver. He was the heart and soul of the franchise for much of its golden era. His character arc, from villain to hero to legendary mentor, is the most complete and beloved story in the show's long history. He didn't just play a character, he embodied an archetype, the ultimate hero who was both incredibly powerful and deeply human. This has cemented his place as a permanent and beloved icon of 1990s nostalgia. But his importance goes beyond simple nostalgia. He was one of the first and most successful examples of an actor who fully embraced the fan convention circuit and turned it into a central part of his career. Long before it became commonplace for actors from genre shows to make a living from appearances, Jason was a pioneer. He understood the power of connecting directly with his audience, and he built a career that was based not on landing the next big Hollywood role, but on nurturing the relationship he had with the fans who had supported him from the beginning. In this, he helped to shape the modern landscape of fan culture. Furthermore, his story has a broader meaning about the nature of identity and the relationship between an actor and their most famous role. While many actors run from the characters that made them famous, Jason ultimately chose to embrace his. He understood that Tommy Oliver was a source of inspiration for millions, and he took on the responsibility of that legacy. He used his Power Ranger fame as a platform to promote the things he was passionate about: martial arts, faith, and a message of personal strength. His life is a fascinating case study in how to navigate a lifelong association with a single, iconic character. He showed that it was possible to honor the past while still forging your own path. But in the wake of his death, his significance has taken on a new and more poignant dimension. He has become a symbol of the silent mental health struggles that so many people face, particularly men. His passing has forced a difficult but vital conversation within the fan communities that loved him. It has challenged the simplistic notion of what it means to be a hero and has highlighted the fact that strength and vulnerability are not mutually exclusive. The story of his life still matters because it is a powerful reminder that we never truly know the battles that others are fighting. His legacy is now twofold. He is the hero who inspired millions of kids to be strong, and he is the man whose tragic loss is inspiring millions of adults to be more open, more compassionate, and more aware of the invisible wounds that so many of us carry. So, what is the ultimate legacy of Jason David Frank? It is a story of incredible highs and devastating lows, of a man who was both a larger-than-life superhero and a fragile, struggling human being. He was a paradox, a fierce and disciplined martial artist who was also gentle and deeply sensitive, a global icon who was most at home in his dojo or in a convention hall, talking to his fans one-on-one. His life was a testament to the power of a single role to shape a destiny. He was, and always will be, inextricably linked to Tommy Oliver. But he was not just a character in a kid's show. He was a father, a teacher, a fighter, and a man of deep faith who genuinely wanted to make a positive impact on the world. He took the gift that the Power Rangers had given him and used it to build a community and to inspire countless people. The tragic end of his story does not erase the light that he brought into the world. In fact, it makes his legacy even more important. It forces us to look beyond the helmet and the colorful spandex and to see the real person underneath. It reminds us that our heroes are human, that they bleed, and that they hurt, just like the rest of us. The greatest tribute we can pay to Jason David Frank is not just to remember him as the legendary Green Ranger, but to remember him as a man who fought bravely, both in front of the camera and away from it. To carry with us the lesson of his life, to be kind, to be open, and to check on the people in our lives, even the ones who seem the strongest. He was a hero to millions of kids, and his story, in its tragic honesty, has the power to make heroes of us all.